I do want to get to some of our audience questions. We have some really great questions that they've submitted. And so I'll open this up to either one of you. First up, we have, as we expand into indications beyond cancer, for example, autoimmune disease, is vein to vein time equally important? Are there other challenges that become more prominent, for example, scale? And again, either one
Yeah.
of you can jump into.
So Arina, maybe I can go first on this one. So yes, as I said, like for cancer and all, vein-to-vein times are critical. I think for autoimmune patients, is it, I think it could be reliable delivery, having the slot when you want, having the slot on time and getting the product back to the patient when you intend to, maybe that's critical. So I think it all depends on what indication that you're looking at, how, and you can tailor your manufacturing process and your overall end-to-end times, right, to really meet that from the patient perspective. So I agree. I think it doesn't need to be like a one-size-fits-all. But I think what we have seen is if you look at vein-to-vein times, I think that's like a single unifying metric that manufacturers could kind of really see what is the health of their overall end-to-end logistics, right? Because it covers your entire supply chain. It covers your manufacturing. If something goes wrong in manufacturing, there's a deviation. There's going to impact your release times. So you could think of what vein-to-vein time makes sense, but it could be a very single unifying metric that gives you a good, like a very good check on how things are going. Because if there is a particulate in the final product, you have to do, let's say, remanufacturing. That's going to impact your vein-to-vein time. So again, that's as you look at your KPIs, then I would say keep this one at the top, but then set it based on what's really the indication that you're going after. But it's, I would say, for autologous, it's like a extremely critical indicator of your health, of how you're delivering.
So I think the only thing I would add is that if with autoimmune where the patient's life expectancy isn't quite as stark. I mean, you're treating patients that are very sick but aren't necessarily terminal. Yeah, there is less focus on the need to get it to the patient right away, which allows you to potentially have a little bit more control around scheduling and whatnot. But the trade-off there as well too is that there's oftentimes more of a regulatory or analytical burden for showing additional testing to make sure that product is safe and whatnot, and also more early interest in potency assays and that type of stuff. So I think it does kind of change the focus, and I think that's a little bit true whether you're talking about autoimmune or if you're talking about allogeneic therapies as well too. The trade-off is that you haven't got quite the rapid pace, but increased analytical burdens and other considerations that you have to focus on.
Sure, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next question. You have both spoken about the introduction of AI and machine learning being part of the future solutions to scaling out manufacturing. When do you think we should introduce digital tools to drive these algorithms? For example, MES platforms linked to LIMS and ERP systems to disguise the data flow in cell therapy manufacturing. So I would open it up to either one of you, but much like my question earlier, would love to know the when.
So I think I can start off with that one. I think with most emerging therapies, cell therapies, we're collecting an awful lot of data. There's data on the collections, there's data on the manufacturing process itself, there's all the QC testing and analytics. Then you've got a wealth generally of patient data, and then you've got kind of translational data that's coming from sampling patient material after they've been treated. I think with all that data, with earlier emerging therapies, we're trying to collect everything because we don't necessarily know from the start what's the most important variables or factors. But then trying to manually combine all that data together, oftentimes you're working with different groups that have, different tools and different, databases or Excel spreadsheets and that type of stuff. I think if you don't start doing that early, you can really miss the ability to tie and leverage different factors together, which can really scope or define where you should develop your process and your delivery and that type of stuff. So I think, that data integration piece and really looking at, combining your PD data, your preclinical, your manufacturing, and your clinical data early on is kind of essential, and not just combining it, but then finding ways to meaningfully mine it and figure out what it looks like. I think that's invaluable to small companies, where, because it's breakthrough technologies, everything's not understood. So the more analysis you can do early on, the less chance that you miss something critical that could really alter how you proceed with your production and trials.
Yeah, totally agree with you, David, on that. And I think maybe my short answer would be, if you haven't started pulling your data, together in a digital format, because I think I would say just start now. It's not too late. I think the 90% of the effort is going to be in collecting data from all the different groups in your company, putting it in a verified database, and having it ready for any advanced analytics that you want to run on it, right? I think many times, even with simple investigation, you're looking for data. 90% of the time, you're spending about collecting the data, putting it in the right format. So I think even if you do that today, I think a lot of these tools you'll be able to use by yourself or in partnership, with certain companies or vendors, and you'll be able to generate a lot of great insights. So, but the data is the key, and the data in your proprietary data, I think your data coming from your own know-how, right? I think, and from your, from your own pipeline, I think that's going to be critical in terms of generating this insight. So I would say get it now, get it in a format that makes sense. And then the other piece was regarding implementation of these digital tools, right? So if you can do it now, do it, but I think make sure that it doesn't slow down implementation, right? At the end of the day, if you're trying to get some, your goal is to deliver for the patient, right? Maybe just ask the question, is it helping you do that? Or if it's slowing you down, then maybe think of a roadmap as to when you can incorporate digitization. And there's a lot of great technologies coming out with no code, sort of MES implementation, or getting your electronic batch records where you can just kind of, without any needing an MES engineer, you can kind of go through and create a batch record easily, right? You can translate your PD recipe to a manufacturing recipe. So those are the great tools available, but I would just say use it wisely. Getting your data, in a structured format definitely won't hurt you. It's just going to reap you a lot of benefits down the road.